when other players might like to mix it up and things like that. So I'm curious to see whether that's just Leroy that's looked into that or whether we'll have similar themes throughout from all of the players. We'll have to wait and see though, as we are into the first game. Looks like Zoo versus Tempo Mage to kick things off.
And straight away, we talked about, maybe Mysterious has built this Tempo Mage a little bit slower. There is a Babbling Book in his hand. He also mulliganed away Emperor Thorasan, which is usually a telltale sign of that Antonidas package being in the deck as well. So looks like it is a slower build we're looking at from Mysterious.
Question is, will he go full on? Will there be Kabbalist tomes? And with the Emperor again suggesting there could be?
Yep.
Yeah.
And how heavy control will it be? Really good queue up for Boar here, though. I think that Zoo does have pretty good matchup here. You get the build early, and the Mage doesn't have any AoE effects until it gets some sort of Flame Waker arcane missiles going, which we see are not in the hand right now. So could be a good start for Boar.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier for Tempo Mage to win in current expansion than it was when they had to deal with Haunted Creeper, Nerubian Egg, all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of minions coming down right now, but not too many of them have those annoying sticky death rattle effects. But Ball Control does immediately grab both possessed villagers in his opening hand, which can do exactly that.
Yeah, and especially with when it comes into using these Fire Blasts, using arcane missiles and things like that. It can be such a pain to have to deal with those possessed villagers. It's just these minions that refuse to leave the board after you've killed them. And we'll see. You can see already Ball Control taking his time on this first turn, basically trying to work out his next few turns. Obviously, he's got those possessed villagers, but he needs to work out when he wants to use that Malkazar's Imp as well with Doomguard.
Yeah, exactly that. He's got to plan ahead exactly where he wants to be on turn 4 going into his Doomguard turn to see if he wants to draw the cards then, or will he need to occupy the board sooner. A lot of planning goes into this Zoo deck now. Zoo's always been hard to play really well. It's just been so forgiving that people don't notice it. But this one's particularly hard to play these days.
Yeah, I don't think Zoo gets enough credit for how there's a few extra percentage points in Zoo that you can squeeze out by being incredibly good at the deck, which is incredibly hard. The problem is it is only those few percentage points. You can play it reasonably well and still get up towards 95% efficiency with the deck, but the very best players do make these incredible plays that a lot of people don't see. But Ball Control right now, just with a handful of 1-drops, not too complicated in this situation as to what he wants to drop down, but would love to pick up Imp Gang Boss sooner rather than later, because I talked about Nerubian Egg rotating out of the game. Nerubian Egg used to be a card that beat Tempo Mage on its own. Now that title very much passed over to Imp Gang Boss, because very much of the effects that you were talking about, Munch, the Flame Wakers, the Arcane Missiles, just cannot really be effective while there's an Imp Gang Boss on the board.
So now, looking at Mysterious's hand, where do you sit as the Tempo Mage at this point? What cards are you looking for to make this hand stronger? Because obviously we can see there's the Azure Drakes in there as well as a Firelands Portal. You can't use them until later on in the game. What is it that he needs to have in his hand?
He needs Flame Waker and missiles or cheap spells, so he needs to get this Apprentice to stick. He can't just be played out there, but because the situation on the board, he's having to do that to challenge this board right now, which means that when he does eventually get a Flame Waker turn to go off, it won't be anywhere near as destructive as possibly it could be. But he has to deal with the board now. You can't let Zoo just get in front.
Yeah, there's basically two ways that you win this matchup as Tempo Mage. The first is just Mana Worm and go quicker than them. It's unlikely, but you can get a faster start than Zoo. If you go turn 1 Mana Worm, turn 2 Apprentice Blast, or turn 2 Cold Sorcerer Coin Blast, something like that, then suddenly you're ahead on the board and you can snowball. If that doesn't happen, then basically you're relegated to just using your resources to stall as long as possible, and then you try and swing the game with Firelands Portal or Flame Strike in the later turns.
Yeah, as we're going to see really soon, Azure Drakes are just too slow in this matchup. Your opponent just goes around them. You get all this card advantage you like, you can die with 7 cards in your hand, but it's not helping you. You need your cheap Ball Control, put the Imp in the middle of the 2 villages. I can't think of a good reason why he wouldn't be on the edge on one side or the other.
Maximum flexibility for Argus, I guess, giving him the most options in terms of when he plays additional minions, that setup would then allow him to have the maximum flexibility of which minions he then wants to Argus.
That works. Yeah, I was thinking that he couldn't Argus there, but yeah, there's going to be additional minions between turn 1 and turn 4, oddly enough.
Speaking of Argus, this very much looks like an Argus turn, just because the other options are, well, very
miserable.
Limited. Yeah, you can tap and hope for another 1-drop, but I feel like Argus is just the safe play here. And also, there's not too much in the Tempo Mage that's really going to punish you turn 4 specifically for that.
He's probably thinking what he wants to do next turn. He's got the Doomguard option next turn to discard this hand, but he also has the option of Sergeant into the second Argus next turn. And that's a long, difficult decision, and he's got 75 seconds now that he can burn. So he might as well use those now to at least get some sort of plan for next turn.
Yeah, I like it. And I imagine the plan will probably be that he'll want to burn through both of these Argus before he plays the Doomguard, just the way his curve plays out now. If he sticks a board, he can play Defender of Argus number 2, plus the Abusive or another 1-drop that he draws next turn. Then the turn after that, he has a decent chance of being able to dump most of his hand and then Doomguard for very little downside. So that's probably the curve that he's looking for at this point. And now with the Drake on the board, that is looking very promising indeed.
Yeah, the Soulfire in hand, not ideal though with the Doomguard as well. The odds are he's going to discard one or the other depending how he does choose to line this up. And like you were saying, Lorinda, this is where the difficult decisions come in. Is do you play that Argus or do you, with the Soulfire in hand now, where is the decision on how you choose to use those cards? Do you just use the Soulfire onto the Azure Drake and hope that you don't discard your Doomguard?
It depends how much he can. If he thinks he can go all the way by playing just his Defender and Soulfire now, then he'll do that to clear the Drake up and have a really dominating board. He'll be factoring in things like Flame Strike. Can I win this game through a couple of minions before Flame Strike? He'll be thinking maybe I lose to something like Blood Mage Thanos into Arcane Explosion. So he'll just want to make sure that he's comfortable before discarding this Doomguard, because you have to assume it would get discarded. That's how you have to plan. If you're in front, you plan for the worst. If you're behind, you plan for the best.
And I think this play just ends up being so much stronger. I mean, this board does not really get dealt with on 5 mana. There is the Archmage, by the way, confirming our suspicions about Mysterious's deck. But this board state, 3 health, 3 health, 1 health, 4 health, this isn't something that Tempo Mage is able to deal with 5 mana. Even a Flame Waker turn on 5 mana does not have a good chance of dealing with this. So there's not really any reason to take the risk with the Soulfire on that turn, because he's in such a comfortable position.
And here's that Azure Drake we were talking about earlier. It's just sat there now, facing down a load of minions that are just going to ignore it and go straight to the face. And Boar just making sure he takes his time every single turn to plan every possibility he can get.
And I think the hand we can see right now from Mysterious epitomizes what we were saying earlier about how he likes to play a more slow, calculated, methodical style. I mean, his cheapest card right now is 4 mana in the Fireball, but then you've got 3 7-drops and a 6-drop. It's, for a Tempo Mage, that's very, very top-heavy.
Yeah, it's a very greedy build, but it is well, he's also been fairly unfortunate with his draw, to be fair to him. There are still Mana Worms and Missiles and Flame Wakers he could have picked up, and this is why it's called greedy. It's a good build, it's a deck you can get away with, but every now and again if you're greedy, you get punished in this respect, and that's why it's called a greedy build. But if he plays against a Control Warrior or something, this hand would be astounding.
Ball control again, back to the point of the previous turn, had the opportunity to just Soulfire this Drake, take the 50-50 of keeping the Doomguard, but again, just look at the spot that he's in. There is no reason to take that kind of risk. He just goes for the consistent play, he jams face. I think what he spent that entire turn thinking about is, how does this spell damage impact my opponent's ability to clear this board? He's gone through every possible scenario, and he said, there is no way I get punished for going face here. I'm just going to jam this all downtown. We're going to end the game right now.
Yeah, there's probably 60 seconds of that time spent. Would he really play Blizzard?
I was about to bring that up. It's like, what are the odds?
I know it's Mysterious. I know he'll bring a really challenging build. Maybe he will just play Blizzard and then think, no, I'm just seeing ghosts.
I mean, it sounds like a joke, but serious point, there was a Babbling Book played, so, you know, Ball Control at least kept track. That was the Frostbolt that was used early, so he knows the book card was gone, doesn't have to account for all that weird stuff. Very comfortable game for Ball Control game 1. Comfortable performance, comfortable matchup, but played it very, very well. Yeah,
took his time. I always like to see that. You see a lot of players come to a big event. Obviously, it's not for the first time for most of these guys, but they come to a big event and they suddenly start playing quickly and panicking. And even I've seen even really powerful players do this and feel for some reason, hey, I'm at a big event, I need to play all my turns in 3 seconds. Why? Ball Control, obviously comfortable in his element. Why not? He's the reigning champion after all.
I think there's something to be said as well about players doing the opposite, because there are Hearthstone players that like to play very, very quickly and don't like long turns, and then you see them enter a larger event and suddenly they're like roping every turn. I think the pressure definitely does something to players in terms of what they feel they should be acting like rather than what they are comfortable acting like.
I mean, I've just come back from BlizzCon where Jason Joe, who was perhaps the strongest technical player in the whole event over the course of the 2 weeks, played an Edwin Van Cleef and then backstabbed afterwards because he just went straight away at the start of his turn. And I, while casting that game, just said, just slow down. There is no reason to play that quickly. You said it earlier. You have 70 seconds. Like, just think about it. These are some of the most important games you'll ever play. This isn't just a normal ladder match. And Ball Control, Mysterious are going to go straight back into yet another of these important games. Mysterious queuing up the Druid now into Ball Control's Hunter.
Ball Control has Snake Trap in his deck. Now, this is huge to me because he was the first person to take Snake Trap out of Hunter because it kept getting wiped out by AoE with Druid, with Swipe, there was a lot of Warrior at the time. Playing all sorts of things that kill snakes. So Ball Control took out Snake Trap, he took out Explosive Trap and said, I'm going to play the good secrets, not waste cards. And he's obviously decided that the meta is such now, with very little Warrior about anymore, and some of that's aggressive now, that actually Snake Trap can sneak back into this deck because there's just not that many ways of getting rid of it. I'm going to ban Shaman, and just maybe Druid won't have Swipe. Yeah, that's the only thing that he'll be worried about.
I mean, I understand the Snake Trap mentality, and I can really get on board with it because Cloaked Huntress is a card that you drop as a minion and then you get to play a secret for free. Right. So when you're playing a minion at the same time as you're playing a secret, Snake Trap is a really nice secret to have in that situation because you're demanding them to deal with a minion and then you get your free snakes. But I completely agree with you. It seemed like the data was showing that Snake Trap was a card that was getting punished more than rewarded. So I am also interested as to Ball Control's inclusion.
And he was the guy who took it out first. Like, it was just to stress, this was Ball Control who was the guy who identified we shouldn't be playing Snake Trap, and now he is. So he's identified something has changed.
I think what does the Snake Trap in itself tell you about the Hunter deck, though? I know I've kind of seen it in the more aggressive styles of the season.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that, but there's a high main.
There is.
So if you'd asked me that in a vacuum, I'd have gone, well, it means he's playing the aggressive version. But there's a high main which often isn't in the aggressive versions.
Yeah, there's High Main, there's Infested Wolf. Even Animal Companion is a card that's been cut out of some of the aggressive lists because, contrary to popular belief, it doesn't always summon a charge minion, and you can play cards on three. You can play cards on 3 mana that literally always summon a charge minion. So most of the aggressive lists have even got away from Animal Companion. So yeah, it feels like this is just Ball Control again, just deciding Snake Trap is a good card right now.
Could he have taken out Barnes and put in 2 Houndmaster? 2 buffs?
I mean, possibly. It's something that to consider for sure, but
there's a lot of beasts in that hand right now.
There certainly is. But there is a Fandral on the board right now for Mysterious, and this was an interesting decision in itself because he could immediately pair this Fandral with a Feral Rage next turn using the Innovate, having an 8 mana turn on his 5 mana turn. But he's just choosing to throw it out here, just trying desperately to deal with that Secret Keeper before it gets out of hand.
I'm a big fan of playing Fandral on turn 4 to Nourish in your hand and saying the times this doesn't get answered, I win the game. Yes, it'll get answered a large percentage of the time. A lot of those answers involve clearing the board anyway, so it's not a disaster. And the times it doesn't get answered, I just go off like a Miracle Rogue turn and win the game.
Sure. And I think often that's the value of Fandral, isn't the dual cards that you get. A lot of the time the value is just forcing them to use their resources to actually answer it. It's essentially like a spell taunt to some extent.
Yeah. There is a very small and exclusive list of must-kill cards. Like, must-kill gets thrown around a lot. There are very few cards that is almost never correct to ignore. And look at Ball Control right there. Spends an entire turn quick-shotting the Fandral, shakes his head, still shaking his head, but that's just what you have to do. You have to respect Fandral.
I think he basically spent that entire turn thinking to himself, is there a world where I can ignore this?
No!
And then after the full 70 seconds came to the conclusion, no. There's definitely... He's going to Nourish. There's no way around this.
I think he's shaking his head because he ran out of time. Like, he was still looking for I don't want to do this, and there's probably a way with Animal Companions and maths that means I don't have to. But it was such an awkward looking turn that he just went for the obvious safe option and just couldn't find a different solution.
Yeah, this is a really nice turn now for Mysterious coming up as well because he's just found himself an Emperor for turn 6.
Must kill cards. There aren't many in Hearthstone.
There you go. This Druid deck plays a few of them. And it also apparently plays Yogg Saron, which is by no means an automatic inclusion at this point. It's become very much a fringe card. Some people still think it's incredibly powerful. Some people not really favoring it in Druid, and it's almost been entirely removed from Mage, where it was an auto-include for a while as well. So, you know, the nerf has had some effect. We're still seeing it pop up now and again, and Mysterious seems to be on the side of the old god here. It's still including it in his Druid.
Yeah, Yoga's gone back to the arguments we all had when it was first printed, before people broke the card of, oh, some people think it's great and some think it's terrible, which is where we all started until people go, hey, we just play 24 spells and a Yogg and silly things happen. But now you can't play it in Mage because it used to be the win condition in the Mage deck, and you can't rely on it. But in a Druid deck where it's just an extra removal spell, a lot of people still think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think it's essentially that like panic button spell, right? You just press it because things aren't quite going correctly right now, but another Nourish comes out, and we're starting to see these turns right now where Mysterious is in a fairly comfortable position. He can keep his Emperor on board if he wants. He's already got that living roots down to 0. If he can find a Malagos, if he does Nourish and Malagos comes out with the Emperor on board, that could be huge looking towards the end of the game.
It's actually just a small question. There is a Yogg in this deck. We haven't seen Malagos, we haven't seen Moonfires, so we actually aren't 100% sure what the eventual win condition of this deck is. It could still be Token Druid at this point, or it could just be the pure late game Druid that some people are favouring without the Malagos in it as well. So we have to wait for a tiny bit more information from Mysterious's deck, but I do suspect that it is the Malagos Druid just by default here. But with the Freezing Trap up, Mysterious does have an interesting decision to make as to whether he wants another turn of Emperor here or whether he wants to deal with that trap so he can actually start developing a board presence.
Well, he has to play another card because he's got 10 in hand right now. So has to do something.
Another thing with this build that we don't know, we haven't got the lists, nor have the players. Some players, especially being a controlling player, they may have something like double portal in this deck. That is an option, so he may be able to play a little more greedily than perhaps we'd give him credit for if he's playing that sort of build. With the Yogg, obviously the portal more of an option because it's more feeding into that. And we see the double Feral Rage, and double portal decks do play double Feral Rage a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, quite often, like, even if you're going for the extreme late game build with like maximum healing, you quite often only play 3 of the healing cards. So like 2 Rage, 1 Portal, 2 Portal, 1 Rage, just in various combinations. So we'll see what comes out here from Mysterious. But Board Control, we talked about must kill minions. He actually chose to leave the Emperor up, just basically saying, hey, I have a Freezing Trap up and a high main, so you're going to be forced to do something to deal with this here, and the Emperor problem will take care of itself. What he didn't account for was Nourish number 2, giving Mysterious way too much incentive just to leave that Emperor on the board.
So the correct play here is to play Barnes, get Ragnos, and win the game.
I have 0 issue with that play. That sounds solid.
Unfortunately, there's probably things that Maths has to say about that. But Boar is just going straight to the face, decided that his route to victory is, you know what, if you can deal with this already with the cards you want in hand, they're cheap enough already. So we talked about must kill minions, Boar disagrees.
He's decided to fall back on the True Hunter way. But now Malagos in hand, Mysterious. He's actually got a 1,000 answers to 1,000 situations, but it's a similar situation to like when you see Control Warrior versus Control Warrior. It's like, how do I allocate these resources? How do I use these spells correctly to actually achieve victory? Because he's only on 17 HP. That's not a huge amount.
He does have 23 damage from hand next turn, though, which is not a small number. I'm just trying to work out, there's no way that he can push here to set up a 2-turn lethal, and even if he could, he'd just be facing down lethal himself, so he does have to play reactively, but those 2 Emperor discounts, hitting the Living Roots and the Swipe, as well as having that Innovate in his hand, means he has colossal damage from hand.
This is where he has to allocate his thinking time really carefully. There's lots of ways to deal with this board, but a lot of them involve eating up his win conditions and not being able to deal with another board. So he has to allocate, how do I want to win this? He has to do that in a few seconds so he can plan the perfect way to actually go with whichever strategy he's come up with.
I agree with this as well, making sure that he can clear as much as possible with that swipe. So essentially getting his swipe ready using that Wrath to set things up. And now Board Control lost a significant amount in that turn, but still on the front foot when it comes to actual damage done. 17 HP is not a difficult number to push down if you're a hunter.
The problem is the fact this Emperor's been here so long and Boar went with the philosophy of I'm going to leave it there and come what may. well, what May is on the way next turn with all these 0 casting cost spells that he's allowed Mysterious to have. I mean, a 3-mana Azure will be disgusting as well. And so his strategy of going face made a lot of sense, but this is the punish that might come up now.
And the terrifying thing as well is you can Azure Drake into Innovate Malagos and then use all of your free spells. So there's a terrifying combo available next turn for Mysterious. And it looks like Ball Control has decided he's just going to have to see what happens and just take it on the chin. Wouldn't be surprised to see the Emperor used to soak up the freezing trap here, just so the spell power stays on board.
I think you play this Azure Drake now and then think.
It's really, he's actually very, very close to lethal, all things considered. Like, the Emperor gets frozen, the Drake sticks on the board, he gets a double spell power buff from the Drake, which means 26 total damage, I believe, goes face. 2 Living Roots and the Feral Rage all getting +7 on spell damage. Well, the Feral Rage doesn't get it. So yeah, I think 26 is the number he has, but I'm going to stop trying to count that while talking and just let Mysterious come up with it himself.
Yeah, I think you play the Azure Drake quickly. I think you're always playing it this turn, so let's see what the other card is, because it may just change your mind if it's a Moonfire.
It's very possible. I think, like, defense, since you don't have lethal right now, defensive Feral Rage is also definitely happening, but that costs 0, so you can do it at any point you want this turn.
I think with a Hunter on 2 cards as well, if you defensive Feral Rage, I think you feel you can win this long game now as well. I think you probably put the Hunter on better hand that he has. You probably think there's a kill command hiding in there or something like that, but
We talked about the Snake Trap, whether it was going to be important in this matchup, why is Ball Control playing it, and now with the swipe already being used on the previous turn, Mysterious has activated a huge amount of damage with those additional snakes. The Drake comes down, there's a Baron! That is huge!
He'll be able to clear this all up.
That's such a huge pickup if he uses the roots as well. This is a full clear alongside an Arcane Giant. He's actually going to choose to leave the Leok up here and keep that double Living Roots for his own lethal push. I'm not so sure about that because look at his board right now. Do you need those roots to go face?
Yeah,
like,
I think you just
have
die.
a million damage on board.
You know when Snake Trap is good, by the way? Is when everybody knows you don't play Snake Trap.
True.
That was triggered there really, really sort of easily because everybody knows the board doesn't play Snake Trap. But now the snakes are out of the bag, so for the rest of the day, people will be able to play around that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things is, you know, we're going to have Jumbray and Hella Leroy sat in the audience just soaking this series in. And I know Leroy pretty much despises Yogg-Saron, so he'll have taken a big
as well as
when he saw
people,
that.
Everything. Yeah.
You and me both, buddy. You and me both.
Yeah. I've got to say, though, in that last turn, I thought that Moonfire was going to be the perfect top deck off of the Azure Drake, but I think Baron Geddon also a very, very good pickup. And now Ball Control very much in a situation where he's got to look to the heavens above. Does have a kill command in hand. Does choose to just push damage to face. It looks like he's certainly heading towards that option. I don't know whether he's going to use it this turn. Yeah, it does in the end.
Yep, Ball Control is just going to play out his hand here, but Mysterious has all the damage in the world. He can play this out in whatever disgusting fashion he feels like. Probably cast his spells first before attacking if he does want to maximize efficiency through a potential explosive trap, but that doesn't even matter. He has him covered by so much damage. That 3 turns of Emperor just ended up being too much for Ball Control to deal with. We talked about must-kill minions. Boar decided Emperor was not a must-kill minion. Mysterious disagreed.
Yeah, his 0 mana do 9 damage non-shaman cards look absolutely incredible right now.
I mean, this is a scenario we can't accept. We need to print that card for Shaman in the next expansion.
It costs 1 mana to do 9 mana damage at the moment. How dare they undercut it? So, fantastically played there, though. He worked out that he had the time, used that double Feral Rage to buy himself a little bit of time. Boar made the decision that he could leave the Emperor up. He thought he had enough damage, and he wasn't far off. I mean, that Emperor got 4 activations, and Boar lost by like 3 health.
Yeah, and also remember that he had to chew through both Feral Rages as well. So if one of those Feral Rages wasn't there, if the second Nourish exactly wasn't there to get the huge second Emperor turn after he left it alive. So statistically, I think what Boar did may have been correct. It's just one of those scenarios where the exact hand it lined up against punished it really, really hard.
And sometimes if you play around the exact hand, sometimes it punishes you more than going, well, if he's got it, good luck.
Right.
And he had it. So played it really well, though, and goes to 1-1.
So now, Mysterious with Mage and Warlock remaining. So 2 of the caster classes remaining, although Warlock often doesn't seem that way. We'll see whether it is though, because we haven't seen Mysterious's Warlock yet, and we already had the conversation earlier, that could be a Reno lock.
Yeah, there are also a lot of, more and more at least, non-Reno control Warlocks starting to try to be played on. Various streamers have played them, various tournaments we've seen bits and pieces of this, and this is going to be control Warlock, but I'm just going to wait for a moment before calling it Reno for sure.
Yeah, just the Imgang boss kept from Mysterious. Of course, we are very suspicious that it is going to be a Reno lock, and with Demon Wrath in the hand, it probably does have a Reno in it, but the Netherspite Historian means that we are packing some dragons as well.
We saw this deck during the, or at least a similar version during the group stages from Mysterious. I think week 3 off the top of my head.
We also saw it from Leroy against Mysterious in protest at the deck.
That's true. That is
he
true.
beat Mysterious with this deck when he had already qualified because he basically hates the deck, so he played it to protest.
I also saw it played in a... Well, I saw Netherspite Historian played in Reno in another UK tournament where it was... I think there was only 3 dragons in the decks. Afterwards, Arthur was like, you're playing Netherspite Historian with 3 dragons. It's like, oh yeah, sorry, I converted it from Dragon Reno to regular Reno and forgot to take Netherspite out. I was, oh, okay. He won though, so no harm done.
Good looking hand here. Like, we're having a laugh about the situation, but well, that's going on. He's going to be able to curve here if he wants.
Whoa, 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 whoa! What are we spending this coin on, Mysterious? Just coins
Coin
a
tap.
1/3 with no dragon in hand. Let's go!
Yeah, and punish those druid decks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, theoretically, often you'd play Sir Finley to get the life tap. He's already got the life tap, so just wants the 1/3.
Honestly, like, serious
Wow.
mode for a second, I think he's just trying to put the 1% doubt into Ball Control's mind that he could still be playing Zoo.
That's fair, though. That is fair. 'Cause
Right.
when
I mean,
you miss
like-
turn 1 and you're known for playing Reno,
Exactly.
you're automatically assumed. But yeah, like you say, messing around with your cards a bit there, maybe.
It's not going to work, but there's no harm in it because the only card he picked up was the coin. So sometimes when you choose to make that bluff, it's actually more damaging to you because you give your opponent information about some of your cards. But all Mysterious touch there is the coin. So if it works, it works. It's not going to. Ball Control is pretty certain this is a Reno deck at this point. But there's no harm in just toying with your coin to try and bluff the fact that you are still playing Zoo.
Especially in fairness against someone like Ball who does analyse every angle and stuff. He's almost more likely to... there's a look on Subtle's face. Subtle, talk about Leroy Jenkins.
I mean, sure. Like, Reno Warlock is an archetype, but it's kind of an umbrella archetype as a deck, right? Like, it's like, oh, I'm playing a Reno log. It's like, okay, now tell me specifically what your 30 cards are. And using those 30 cards, you can transform it into a N'Zoth Reno, a Cthulhu Reno, a Dragon Reno, a combo Reno, where you start packing together Leroy Jenkins, Power Overwhelming, Faceless Manipulator, conventionally. It does start to get a little bit sketchy sometimes when you are combining more than 2 of those things together. So Dragon Combo Reno appears to be what we're looking at right now.
That sounds like a really expensive dinner.
Wow. Dragons are probably delicious, huh?
I would assume so. I guess it's quite tough meat, though, I would think.
And with those few words, Brian Kibler will never
There
speak
is-
to me again.
There is the dragon required. So now, Netherspite Historian. He may wait for a long, long time before playing this, by the way. This is a card that you can keep in your hand until you know what you need from it, rather than just plopping it on the table.
Well, the other side of that is that Netherspite Historian also starts a daisy chain of dragon effects. So you can play Netherspite Historian and then pick a high-value dragon, and then that dragon is then always in your hand to activate other dragon effects. So with Bookworm in hand, which of course needs another dragon to activate it, there may be merit in just playing the Netherspite Historian sooner rather than later, just so you have that dragon security for your activators.
Yeah, how's Alex Straza going to go down with Leroy in hand? That sounds like fun.
Sounds promising. Yeah, I think...
Okay, so now it's go time.
The
because
Blackwing
curve says so.
Corruptor Bookworm hand means probably just Netherspite Historian and tap this turn.
See how he does plan to go with this one. I wouldn't be surprised to see Emperor in this deck as well.
You can't
when
tap,
you see
right?
things like Leroy there.
You're on 9 cards, so tapping will put you on 10 because you don't lose a card when you play the Netherspite. So
true.
You've actually got to do something that might be a little bit awkward for him.
You could tap Netherspite and then coin Mortal Coil your own 1/1 after attacking. that's a potential play that would stop you from burning a card, because you'd cycle the coin, and the coil would only cycle into one more card, so you'd make that one extra space in your hand.
See how he chooses to go here. Be interesting if he does pick the Alexstrasza here as well, to just go for that pretty rapid looking kill.
Other side of that, you could. There's an argument to be made for going for the Fairy Dragon just because it comes out this turn. You actually have a good second half to this turn.
And that's what he's decided to go with. Yeah, he's just going to put things on the board. Druid does struggle to clear boards, but with 6 cards in hand, I feel like this board attempt will fail.
Yeah, I think that, the idea of like Druid can't really deal with your minions is a little bit outdated at this point. Like, people are still stuck in that mentality from the days of mid-range Druid, where they just played Wrath, Swipe, and a pile of dudes that hit you in the face.
It can't deal with 2/8/8, but it can deal with a wide board of things like this.
As soon as you start approaching like the 6 health mark, that's suddenly when everything just needs to be mulched, and they're only playing like 1 maximum. But boards like this, Druid is actually really, really tidy at being able to deal with right now.
Now, board control, he's got a couple of options right now. Obviously, the Azure Drake is perfectly fine. You get a minion on board, you cycle a little bit, but also with Nourish in hand, I feel like that's a decision that he's going to have to make, and also a decision that different players would do differently.
I think his biggest problem right now is working out what's going on.
That's a fair point, yeah.
Like, we can see what's going on, but he's sat there with a perfectly adequate hand for dealing with this, but he doesn't know what he's got to deal with on the next 2 or 3 turns. So the main problem he's having with playing this Nourish, I think he probably decided fairly quickly he was going to. But where do you allocate these removal spells? Like, what's coming next?
Yeah, I mean, I love this decision from him from ball control to ramp with the mana here as opposed to drawing cards, because his hand has a high-value threat in it with Ancient of War. It has an expensive, destructive combo with Azure Drake and Swipe in it as well. And it also still has 3 more card draw effects, Drake and 2 Wraths that he can cycle. So the choice of mana here makes a ton of sense to me.
Mysterious. It's really odd. He's pushing a bit of damage, and he has so much control in his hand that when board does something, at least the first 2 minions that board tries to play are going to get dealt with quite well. But Mysterious also not tapping much, knowing that Malygos Druid can obviously finish him off pretty quickly.
How is Sylvanas as an answer to Ancient of War? It seems fairly promising.
It's always been one of the better answers to Ancient of War. In fact, we've seen Druids in recent times playing Sylvanas in Druid as an anti-Druid measure as well.
That was a lot of Druid.
There is a lot of Druid, because Shaman's banned.
just mimicking the meta with your sentence.
Yeah, I like to convey everything.
That's good. So, I mean, Sylvanas can be dropped here just as a pure answer, but also, like, Blackwing Corruptor alongside the spell damage Mortal Coil actually means he can deal with the 5/10 pretty nicely, honestly. So, does he even need to drop the Sylvanas here?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like... I think I like your play there, just pretty efficient. Mortal Coil won't get much use in this matchup unless he has to take out a Living Roots for some reason. But when you've gone past about turn 6, Living Roots almost exclusively gets used at face. So I think I like your play there, but this is obviously fine, right? Sylvanas into a 5/10 is obviously reasonable.
Speaking of reasonable, both Moonfires in hand alongside the Malygos, so Ball Control has the opportunity here to just try and push, because he has the 12 damage burst directly from his hand with Malygos. He has a Swipe in hand. He can push 5 more to face this turn with the Ancient of War plus a hero power, so he's already getting into that potential range where he's setting up lethal pushes. But if he tries to go for that line, he's giving up the board forever for 1 point, so he could just die straight up. And then secondly, he's potentially just losing the game to Reno. So Ball Control actually chooses to take the reactive turn here and deal with the board on his own terms.
Yeah, and it's a pretty decent reactive turn. He is going to have that double Wrath still hanging over. He's going to have the massive mana advantage. So the combination that you said when he nourished, the combination of the card draw and the mana advantage is still giving him a decent chance. But Mysterious all the time is assembling what could be a pretty terrifying, unexpected win.
And we saw Ball Control kind of shake his head as he made that play as well. When you've got Malygos in hand, it always feels awful to have to use that Moonfire to clear. But now with it going over toward Mysterious, I mean, there's a couple of plays that look pretty nice on this turn, to be quite honest. I mean, you've got the Blackwing Corruptor, you can trade your 1/1, that's the Azure Drake dealt with, you've got the board then in your favour. then you've got to ask the question, what else do you do in that turn? Because he can't just tap to start the thing because he'll burn a card. So he's in kind of this awkward situation where he can't quite order the turn how he would like.
Yeah, and he's going to start digging as well, because if he can dig into the rest of the combo, which would be Power Overwhelming or Empathorisand type cards, I mean, Boar is going to walk into this 100% of the time if Mysterious can just dig out the cards that he needs. This is, I think, a decision made to win round 1.
Very possibly. I mean, I would not be considering playing around Leroy combo against a Dragon Reno lock unless, you know, it comes down to the point where, like, okay, I've won this game 100% of the time.
So therefore, what beats me?
Right. I win this game 100% of the time. Oh, no, wait, there's like a 0.01% chance he's playing Leroy combo. I'll play around that. No, he's actually just playing Leroy combo. So
because
you could just catch him by surprise here, for sure.
They know who they're playing in round 1. Mysterious knows that if he can win this against Boar Control with the greatest respect to the other guys who are also terrific players, but Boar is the man to beat in this event. If you can get that out of the way early and take your chance with the other guys, then I kind of like this.
And as well, I mean, whoever you're against in your first semi-final, you want to be on that upper bracket, right? Your first loss is your lifeline, so you want to hold on to that as long as possible in this tournament. And even as far as the finals go, we have a kind of double bracket for the final as well. If you are from the winner's bracket and you lose the final, you get a second chance. You get a retry of that final.
Actual,
you still have that winner's bracket
real
advantage.
double elimination.
Yeah, exactly. But
which will please Sottle, I'm sure, from the fighting game community days.
Yeah, exactly.
Sottle is just grinning and nodding right now.
But we can see Reno has now been drawn for Mysterious, and that is... It's been said many times that Reno deck often is kind of like flipping a coin. It's like, I draw Reno, I win. I don't draw Reno, I lose.
Exactly, yeah.
He has drawn Reno, so it's certainly looking pretty good for Mysterious.
Yeah, that is a thing that I've been known to say, that thing.
Really? I've never heard that. Amazing.
It does apply a bit more to
May
sort
or
of
may not have
aggressive
got
decks where you've stabilised and need the Reno after the stabilisation. But even so, yeah, getting that Reno allows him, it does open him up so much more things. He can now tap more aggressively, knowing that there may be a turn where he can tap where he wouldn't then drop the Reno to play around Malygos, for instance. So it's definitely a pickup that is huge. He will be looking for Emperor and Power Overwhelming. They will be 2 cards that will be on his mind, but right now Reno is a 4/6 actually isn't the worst thing on its own.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's just an awkward minion against Druid. So, I mean, this is why it's really been huge for Boar Control, the amount of removal that he's had to use, the Moonfire, the swipes, etc. Because even a deck with the burst heal that Reno Lock has, it still naturally taps. It's still, you know, the big fine line with playing Reno is how low can I push my own health before I eventually Reno. And Malygos Druid is a deck that, you know, if you go 1 health too low, if you misjudge that equation by a single point, then Malygos Druid will just immediately burst you down. But that option is just slowly melting away for Boar Control now.
It is, but that hand, Mysterious, does need to tiptoe quite tiptoeily around this hand because the damage is building up in that hand. And he will know it. I mean, we're halfway through the decks at this point, so he will know the number is 19 that you play around a lot, which is double Moonfire Living Roots with Malygos. So that's a number I think we'll see him play around. Yeah, there we go. He's getting himself just out of 21 range as well. So,
and it's, to be honest, conceptually, this is a very similar matchup to something we saw in the group stages where it was Control Paladin up against a Freeze Mage, and it's like, how often do I need to use my healing? How high HP do I actually need to stay in? We actually ended up seeing over 30 damage in burst, so it didn't matter how high they stayed.
It's honestly, like, it's a skill that almost any Hearthstone player can get. It's just memorization. You just literally need to know every single possible combination of damage. It gets pretty complex when you throw in the Raven Idols as well, if they've cast those and suddenly have this huge range of spells that they can have. But it's something that everyone is able to do, but many people don't bother to do and really don't have that information locked up.
Yeah, I know that as a caster thing, I mean, casters don't talk about casters very often, but for things like Murloc Paladin, things like Freeze Mage, you just learn a lot of key numbers rather than calculate it all in 3 seconds. So, and players can do the same. You guys at home can do the same thing. Learn those key numbers for different matches. Because Druid isn't just 14 anymore, kids.
Oh, it was a simpler time.
Well, Boar Control has got to a point now. He's at the end of his tether and he's just saying, look, I've got a huge board. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, he's also picked up that second living root, so he's got a huge combo in his hand as well, which needs to be defended. And best way to defend against somebody killing you next
Look
turn.
at his face! Look at his little face! He had no idea he was about to get double Leroyed. As I said, he made the aggressive push. Board control gave the double threat on the board. He said, deal with my board and heal out of range of my Malagos burst. Reno Lock cannot do that most of the time, but the one thing he didn't account for, we talked about it exactly, is just dying to the Leroy burst.
And there are times as a pro in any game, any sport, anything at all, where you just have to say to the other guy, you got me.
Well played.
you got me, well done. And that is one of those times right there.
And I mean, you said he was having to work out how he was going to deal with this massive board, and it goes back to a World of Warcraft term that I'm very familiar with, of death is the best CC. If you can just finish them off, they're no longer an issue. And that means that Mysterious is now 2-1 up in this series. And to be honest, a situation that I hadn't really expected to be happening. I was expecting ball control to be fairly comfortable in this series. I mean, I personally predicted a 3-1 to ball control, so Mysterious already going ahead and above expectations.
Yeah. He does still have this greedy mage deck left though, and it could be difficult for him. Druid versus mage is nowhere near the free win for tempo mage that it used to be at all, especially with the removal of cards like Mirror as a secret and so on.
Yeah, Mirror Entity, the Shade of Naxxramas Flame Cannon interaction used to be enormous as well, because Druid would just want to play Shade early, Flame Cannon would just absolutely ruin it. Chance to tempo that out with a Mana Worm or a Sorcerer's Apprentice or something similar as well. Now it's kind of the other way. It's Druid that plays removal for the first few turns and then dominates the late game, whereas that used to be Tempo Mage's job previously. So definitely a winnable matchup for the Druid, and a potentially very powerful matchup if this is a clunky Tempo Mage list that we see. So the Hunter could also just go too quick for it.
Okay, getting that Mana Worm, that's the thing we were talking about earlier. That's absolutely key if you're playing this heavier deck, that you do get your early start, because there's not so much early start available, and as we see there, the rest of it, despite mulliganing 2 cards, is still really heavy.
Yeah, I was about to bring up the topic of, do you keep Barnes here? Just because we saw how top heavy this deck is. A lot of those answers are great as Barnes targets, right? Especially when you look at things like Emperor, like one of the best Barnes targets you can get, really. So
it's tempting to keep Barnes because it's the only 4-drop you ever play in Tempo Mage, apart from the occasional Water Elemental a lot of the time, but in a lot of lists it's the only 4-drop. So in terms of just developing minions, it seems like a reasonable keep. The counter argument is that so many of the Barnes outcomes, Flame Waker, Azure Drake, Archmage Antonidas in this list, they want extra mana to be left over as well, so it actually becomes a later play than a turn 4 play in a lot of situations.
I think with Coin you could consider it a lot more strongly to power your Mana Worm, Coin Barnes, make an extra guy just to challenge the Hunter's board, but without Coin it's just a little bit slow, and like Sottle says, you do need sometimes just to cheat with Barnes later game.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a pretty hefty hand going the way of ball control right now. He's going to have this Cloaked Huntress this turn that he can drop alongside a Snipe if he does choose to coin that out. Or you can even just go for the safer play of literally just dropping the Kindly Grandmother. I don't really see any issues with going with that line of play.
Just going to comment on the heaviness of this deck again. Not only is it a heavy deck, so cards are going to stick in your hand, but just in case it wasn't heavy enough, there's an Acolyte of Pain to draw you more stuff. There is the argument it can draw you out of trouble and into cheaper stuff, but when your hand's going to have cards sticking in your hands, Acolyte can be another awkward part of your equation here.
Yeah, it's strange to me to see Acolyte in this build because, I agree with your assessment. There's kind of 2 theories to deck building, which is you either need card draw to make sure that you have options in hand, or you build a stable curve so that, your card draw is just drawing big enough stuff on average each turn. That's the theory that we see Hunter go with, for example. They have high mains, they have Ragnaros sometimes, so they don't need card draw. So when suddenly you're looking at multiple 7-drops, Antonidas, probably Ragnaros, Emperor in this deck, does make me wonder whether the Acolyte does need to be in here.
Because it's at least a 5-drop in this deck. Sure. You always want to at least ping it, or it's pointless. You might as well just play a 3-3. So it'll be interesting how it works out as the day unfolds, but my first instinct is it might be a problem card.
It is strong in the Barnes list, though. I will give it that.
Yeah.
Acolyte and Loot Hoarder is a cards that we've seen come into Tempo Mage because of Barnes. Here he's going to play it out into the Snipe. Ball Control did choose to go for the Cloaked Huntress turn, which also surprises me just a little bit because he had a perfectly reasonable looking bow turn to take care of the Mana Worm. Then next turn he could have potentially drawn another secret, just like he did with the Cat Trick, and just gone Cloaked Huntress, Cat Trick, and the secret. Does still have the Cloaked Huntress in play here, but doesn't have a bow in play, which is the difference.
Maybe he felt that it was acting as a must-kill card.
Sure.
So that was a way to deal with the Mana Worm, was just to put it down as a must-kill card, maybe bait out a Frostbolt that could be used later on something more important. Maybe get rid of something that could clear the way for something else later. But yeah, I'm interested as well that the bow did not come down. Maybe saving the bow for when he did have some secrets, because the bow on its own is not necessarily that great.
I think maybe the one thing he was scared of, if he went bow and killed the Mana Worm, and Mysterious just played Flamewaker on curve, he actually didn't really have a nice way to deal with Flamewaker. He'd have a bow equipped, but he'd have no additional sources of damage in hand to be able to take care of the 2/4.
And tell us about a bow with 1 charge.
Yeah, let's not. But by playing the Snipe on that turn essentially for free, that was the card that he was scared of.
Right.
He was scared of Flamewaker, I think, in the end. So just chose to take the Snipe. Just feels secure as long as Flamewaker didn't come down.
We mentioned Barnes earlier. To be honest, I don't dislike just dropping Barnes on this turn, just see what you get. Like you said earlier, there could be things like Savannah Highmanes and Ragnaros in this deck that when you get them from a Barnes, it can often just win you the game on the spot, just the sheer power from those cards.
It functions very, very differently in the Hunter deck, in that all of the cards it gets you are pretty much tempo cards. They are cards that put you those death rattle effects that you just described on the board, whereas in the Mage, as Sottle said earlier, it puts down these value effects which slow you down as much as anything, but in a very convenient, good way.
Yeah, and we have already seen Highmane from this build by Ball Control. We've already seen Infested Wolf. We see Kindly Grandmother in hand, so we know there are a ton of good outcomes for the Barnes in this deck already. As you said, there may be a Ragnaros that we haven't seen yet. We'll see what happens here from the Barnes. Just a Secret Keeper. No huge outcome here, especially with so many of his secrets already played.
Yeah, choosing to protect his minions there, having to do that trade always hurts when you do that 4-3 into etc. But has to be done. Still got a very nice looking board, and this is where Hunter excels, especially if you can pick up something a little bit heavier next turn.
I've got to say, I would be nervous leaving minions on the board with just 1 HP going into a turn 5.
Right.
Easily could be like a Flamewaker Frostbolt that really damages that board.
This is gonna hurt though.
Yeah.
The Cat Trick, one of the huge tools that Hunter now has against this Tempo Mage deck. You really do want to pop that card on your own terms, usually when you're dropping a Flamewaker. Again, Flamewaker missiles there would have been doubly terrifying because it even then has the chance to take out the Cat Trick, but this is now just so much damage coming through from Ball Control.
And you don't even need to do huge chunks of damage as Hunter. That your bow and your hero power just finish it off. That's the great thing about Hunter. You just get a couple of attacks like this, and that does end the game a lot of the time.
And now look at this hand for Mysterious. It's going to be so difficult to deal with this huge board that Ball Control's managed to build up. I don't know whether he's actually running Flame Strike in this deck. I don't think we saw it last game.
We didn't. It seems likely there would be one in here because there's so few spells.
Yeah.
You're going to need that reset. You're not getting the board early. You've got fewer spells. There's no Torch, almost certainly, in this deck. So I think you would have to play a Flame Strike to make this deck function.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'd almost certainly think we're looking at Flame Strike in this build, but the kill command pickup here from Ball Control, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20 damage, I believe, which means this is just game over. Tempo Mage cannot heal, so he just goes face here, sets up all the damage, then next turn he's able to finish the job with a hero power. There is one proviso to add to this statement, and it is Babbling Book.
I'm trying to go through all the things that... While you were talking there, you said there is no way. I think Babbling Book must have a way, but I have no idea what it is apart from Ice Block.
It's Babbling Book into Ice Block, somehow set up some nonsense 2-turn lethal of your own. I don't think even that is happening.
I have seen Tempo Mages that... Oh, Violence Ball.
Here we go.
Hammerzeal!
Is it?
No.
Hammerzeal does happen. It's just a minion in that pool.
I mean, it's a taunt. It was better than nothing, but it's still not enough. And Well, we're going to the full 5 games, ladies and gentlemen. Ball control managing to even things up there. And now, this is going to be an interesting one. I'm trying to remember the two.
So it's the Druid against the Mage, and the Druid, one of the small weaknesses it's going to have here as opposed to a normal Mage is it is going to give the Mage some time to establish. So the Mage is going to be able to have some options late game. It's going to get to use those Fireland portals and such like. The problem is that the Tempo Mage tends to need to burn out the Druid, and if it can't establish this board, then where's the minion damage going to come from early game?
Fireland's Portal is a huge card in the Druid matchup, though, so the fact there's 2 of them in this build could be in Mysterious's favour. You know, you jam it on Emperor, you jam it on an Azure Drake, you jam it on Fandral, you know, all of these things like completely swing if it comes to the point where you do have 7 mana available when they hit the board, so potentially huge game coming up for Mysterious, but so far, this decision to kind of roll back the clock a little bit and go to the slower, more control-y Tempo Mage list as opposed to what we saw primarily at BlizzCon, which was more aggression from the Tempo Mage lists. Be it through burn damage, be it through minions, people had their own twist on it, but it was all extra aggression in some way or another. And now Mysterious, being the control player that he is, has decided that he wants the Emperor Antonidas package in there instead.
And you've got to say as well, like the 2 games that we've seen this Tempo Mage fail in have been against aggressive decks, right? I mean, obviously the Hunter deck not overly aggressive, but still you're wanting to win around turn 7-8, which is where this Tempo Mage actually gets to start playing his cards.
So, right? Yeah,
I feel like
getting smashed in the face.
Exactly. And I feel like against this slower Druid, he actually is going to have the option to play some of these cards, and the Emperor will actually start to get value.
But here's the thing, we saw Mysterious in his interview, we heard him say, I expected my opponents to bring aggressive decks down to a T, and because of that, I brought this control lineup that I think is going to be effective. So he obviously feels like this Tempo Mage list has enough in the early game to shut down the aggro decks. He has just drawn the anti-aggro hand against the first deck that he's played that is not likely to have an aggressive start.
Yeah, because in fairness, we've been picking on the deck a little bit, saying that it's a little greedy, but it is just that. It's a little greedy. It's not completely insanely full of 7 drops. He's just drawn them 2 games in a row.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've seen missiles get drawn. I imagine that's still in the deck. It's an amazing card. Arcane
seems unlikely that missiles wouldn't be.
Arcane Blast is in the deck. Frostbolt is in the deck. Flame Waker, Blood Mage, Thalnos
is the first time we've seen.
Cult Sorcerer, I assume, is also in this deck, unless he's replaced them with Loot Hoarders for the Barnes package.
Right.
So there is a ton of early game in this deck that we have not seen get drawn, and Mysterious now is picking it all up in the matchup where, honestly, he wouldn't mind having a decent amount of his mid-game.
Although he has got this good enough looking curve right now. If he can just get something like 12 to 15 damage into the face before the Druid gets established, then he can just then go with that burn package to the face while he lets his board sort of vanish later on. He's going to have options with this hand. It's the first time he's really had any choices to make, not any really strategic choices to make, because the hand he's been dealt.
I'm curious to see as well how he chooses to use Flame Waker in this game, because Flame Waker, there's a lot of different ways you can use it, and often, I think it was you saying it to me, Lorinda, the other day, that Flame Waker often can be just used as basically +2 spell damage, but regularly is used to clear the board to kind of flip a game, but in this more slow matchup, it's unlikely that Flame Waker is going to have that major effect.
It's one of the cards that distinguishes who can play this deck from who can't.
Yes.
And it's really difficult to get the exact timing right, and it's not something you can learn. It's like some decks you just learn, you always do this on turn 4 because it sets up this. Flame Waker, you have to look at each situation, each opponent, each hand, and it's different every time.
I think, like, primarily against Druid, a lot of the time, like, Flame Waker as a clearing tool isn't all that effective. Like, Flame Waker actually is an aggro card in this matchup a lot of the time. It's what you want to use, try and stick it to the board. You know, play it in a situation where you have a read on they've used a lot of their removal, and just jam it on the board, try and get 2 turns of just damage going face, damage going face.
And that Arcane Intellect that was just played has basically shown us the entirety of Mysterious's 4 and under cards. And he is going to be able to start going completely wild to try and get a lot of this damage to face while he's got the opportunity, because board control is slowly but surely edging towards that no-ish.
He's going to go completely wild and draw Mad Scientist next.
Wow. Hearthstone
Got
jokes.
him!
I've got to say, I wouldn't have disliked playing Flame Waker last turn, just because Feral Rage was used the turn before. It was like a Do you have 2 in your hand? Am I just that unlucky?
So here's the thing. It's a respect read from Mysterious, the way that I see it, because Mysterious was going into his turn 3. Ball Control used a Feral Rage on a Mana Worm going into Mysterious's turn 3. So the second level read there from Mysterious is he has another way to answer my Flame Waker, because that would be a terrible play for him to make if he didn't have a way to deal with my Flame Waker.
Yeah, and that's not just like a thing that you're saying either. The previous game we saw exactly that. We saw the Snipe come down into the turn 3 from Boar. We saw the Respect come back from Mysterious where he played the Acolyte. So that is exactly the same interplay as before, so that makes a lot of sense.
Now it might just be time, though. This is a lot of damage. Nope, Mysterious going to stall it out here. He does already have the potential to just start jamming a ton of damage to the face with that Flame Waker, but I guess he does want to preserve some of his options in hand as reactive tools.
I think the way he's played this means that when he has something to kill with that Arcane Blast, he can then get the full value out of the Flame Waker with his one casting cost spells at the same time and still do a whole chunk of damage.
Yeah, and Ball Control, from his perspective, it's turn 7. He would have loved to just start jamming a 5/10 on the board, but jamming a 5/10 into Drake is scary for so many reasons. Yeah. It's scary because of Arcane Blast. It's also scary because of Coin Firelands Portal in this situation. I didn't manage to get that sentence out before the card was drawn.
Boar's realised it, by the way.
A genius.
While you were talking there, Boar suddenly sort of stopped and looked at the board and started shaking his head as if to say, oh no, this is a thing, he's still got coin.
This just put my foot in my mouth.
Yeah, this interaction comes up like so much more often than it seems like it should be able to, but I actually don't even think like it's the best play here, because Flame Waker double Arcane Blast is available to him alongside coin, alongside other spells as well, so he has the opportunity to just really go off this turn now.
Right, and he's been waiting for this to get this value from these Arcane Blasts. There's not that many targets in Druid. Druid sort of pootles around and then kills you, so the space in the middle where you can actually do stuff.
That is perfect. Both shots to the face. The coin. Oh, okay, never mind. I thought he was just going to get the absolute dream of every Flame Waker shot going to the face.
And Boar is going to have to sort of take his foot off the gas on his noses and deal with this board right now. And he's going to have to hope that Mysterious' hand isn't the hand that we can see.
And I think the key thing about that play using the Flame Waker instead of going with the Firelands Portal is this turn it demands an answer. The Firelands Portal you could just get like, I mean worst case scenario you get something like a 3/3 and there is basically nothing you're begging of your opponent, and you also have to trade in your Azure Drake. So then you're just left with what's out of the Firelands Portal.
Yep.
This way he's dealt with a minion, he's also got some damage interface, and he's built up this board that it demands an answer. You cannot ignore an Azure Drake and Flame Waker.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that this deck is still managing to hang on to the title of Tempo Mage is you often win with your last card in hand, just falling over the finishing line with Tempo. And so anytime you can preserve that Firelands Portal to go face potentially, and you'll probably end up on a minion, but anytime you can keep that window open, sometimes it is just your last card 5 to face kill you.
I think Ball Control again. Ball Control, you know, one of the most emotional players, one of the most expressive players you will ever watch. And I think he's starting to realize that this game could just be slipping away from him, here. And it does come back potentially to that decision on the last turn, because he had the opportunity to just have a removal turn. Instead, he went with the 5/10 into the Drake, and with no Arcane Blast scene, no Firelands Portal scene, there are so many ways that could go wrong for him. It went spectacularly wrong for him, about as bad as it could have possibly gone wrong. But still, the risk of a blowout turn there from Mysterious was so high, I do have to question the play.
To highlight, though, one thing that maybe was playing on his mind, Mysterious held that Flame Waker back a long time when we were considering maybe he could play it, maybe not.
Sure.
And Mysterious outweighted him. He sat there on that Flame Waker and, you know, maybe Boar said, perhaps there's not a Flame Waker, maybe I'll take this chance here.
Yeah. I think one of the situation Boar's in right now as well is, and it's a difficult situation for Druid, and it's one that you see fairly often where if they've fallen behind in the early game, they've had to keep using removal. They end up with both Nourishes in hand, and they essentially, when it comes to like turn 8, turn 9, it's like miss a go basically. Yeah. You just have to use the Nourish because you have no other options. And now, with only 4 mana remaining this turn, he is looking at an Arcane Giant. That is an option, as well as Feral Rage.
Yeah, the problem with Arcane Giant is that it just dies to any spell. There is triple spell damage on the board right now. I don't think you can allow this situation to continue and expect to win the game in any world. Ball control, though, just goes straight up for the armor.
This is a lot of damage here.
6 damage Arcane Blast.
I mean, this is 18 damage just from the Frostbolts alone and the missiles.
12, 18, yep, 22, 25, 28. I think we've got him.
I think it is.
Yep.
This is the second time we've seen this from Mysterious, where he's playing a mage and everyone's like, still got a couple of turns left, and then you suddenly realise that with the amount of spell damage he actually has on board, and actually this is the second time against ball control as well. It was ball control that left Mysterious spell damage on the board during the group stage, and Mysterious punished him for it with the Evolved Kobold in his Freeze Mage deck. This time it's a Tempo Mage, and the 3 spell damage comes to bite ball control in the bum once again.
Yep, ball control did it the hard way last year, where he had to win the final twice. He's going to have to do it the hard way again if he's going to retain his title. Mysterious there with particularly that Warlock deck, just going, okay, I'm going to try and surprise ball control, take him down, and take my chance from there on. And he's done exactly that. He finds himself going through, and ball control is going to have to go through that lower bracket.
Yeah, and crucially for him in that last game, it was the Tempo Mage that was looking a bit suspect for him, the deck that he was going to need to perhaps struggle to get a win with. He drew the anti-aggro hand, or at least the aggressive hand, against the Druid, but it turned out that just the aggression was good enough. And it really does trace back to that turn from ball control, where he gave the Tempo Mage the ability to leverage one of their snowball minions. That's what they want to do on any given turn. They want to leverage a minion. Ball control opened the window, and Mysterious just dived headfirst through it.
Yeah, and I think one of the major things as well was Mysterious had so many options to him, so many different ways to capitalize as well. Because, I mean, you mentioned that the Violence Portal was the perfect answer, but there was also an even more perfect answer in that hand. He didn't even have to go with Violence
Yeah, the portal was still in hand at the end there. That's how far in front he was.
But we do have Dan Gaskin standing by on stage. He's going to be standing by with Mysterious, who's just taken the win, the underdog, if you will, sneaking through under the radar once again. Let's head over to stage with our big man, Danny G.
The big man, Danny G, joined by the mystery man himself. It is Mysterious. You must be feeling pretty good after a win against last year's champion.
Yes, I finally have my revenge against ball control, so I'm really happy. It seems that ball control doesn't have control at all. So.
Wow, and how did you prepare coming into this? Did you target his lineups in particular? Obviously, I heard in your interview you were saying that you brought control method kind of decks. Is there a deck you were really expecting him to bring?
Yes, he brought exactly the same lineup as I would expect, so I was prepared.
Okay, and do you think you can go on to win this thing now that you've beaten the reigning champion?
Of course, I just beat the previous champion, so it should be easy for the rest.
Okay, well, a very confident Mysterious. We'll head back up to Munchables and the men. We'll go for men this time and let them pick apart that game.
Thank you very much, guys. Mysterious feeling confident, saying the rest of the tournament should be easy at this point. And I think I want to pick up on one of the things he said there in that this was exactly what he expected ball control to bring. He kind of read the situation perfectly, and he's come out with a win on top of that. Do you think it is down to the individual play in that series, or do you think it is a matter of Mysterious just reading his opponent extremely well?
I think Mysterious has some very twisted ideas on matchups.
Yeah.
If I was... if that's like the exact lineup that you expected ball control to bring, and you're saying like I brought my lineup to counter this, I don't think Mysterious's lineup counters ball control. I think he played very well and he won that series because of his familiarity with some of his decks. But if I was trying to design like optimal lineup to defeat what I correctly predicted from ball control, it wouldn't be some of the, particularly like the tech card inclusions that we saw from Mysterious.
I think the Warlock was fine. I think that he brought that to beat ball control, knowing ball control wouldn't spot it. Like the way that game could have gone would have been stall out, stall out, stall out, surprise, I win. Yeah. But the Tempo Mage feels a bit slow for Ball's lineup, so that did surprise me a little bit. There were some decisions as well that made the game close. Ball, in the very first game with Hunter, did decide just to go for it, that this Emperor won't hurt me, and it did, but only just. So it was a close match, but give him credit, he's planned for ball control and he's beaten ball control. You can't really argue with that.
Nope. Yeah, and now you've got to bring up the question of, if he has planned specifically for ball control, how well does this lineup hold up against his next opponent? Obviously, Hello Leroy is about to go up against Jambray, and we're going to see what they're bringing to the table. And Mysterious, he's going to be sat downstairs, kind of biting his nails, hoping that they're going to be bringing something similar to ball control at least.
Yeah, I mean, from his interview, he said that he thinks Jumbre is going to play quite an aggressive strategy. He thought ball control was going to play quite an aggressive strategy. He said, the X factor in this for him was Hello Leroy, and I entirely agree with that assessment. Hello Leroy, I have seen him bring some absolute nonsense, and it can be his strength, but also his weakness. I remember Season 1 that I actually played in, he had a lot of success with a Flood Paladin deck that, no one else is really playing, but we've also seen him get punished by bringing, Reno Mages and wacky stuff like that. So Mysterious's assessment of, where the wild card is in this tournament, I think is dead on.
And he set that. Leroy set that up in week 7, where he deliberately brought, as he's already qualified, a lineup that was sort of half serious and half completely off the wall, bringing his own Reno deck. So that's Leroy playing the mind games at the highest level of mind gaming there. And we heard it in the interview there, or heard it yesterday. Oh my goodness, what do I do about Leroy? But we'll see.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key things as well, is you mentioned Leroy last week in the group stages was playing kind of things that are a little bit off the wall. We've been seeing that on ladder as well. Some of these players either playing on the NA server or playing on a different account, things like this, just to avoid being scouted. I think that's been a huge factor coming in here. And I saw them playing yesterday. Ball Control was playing on his NA account.
Yeah.
He was just mashing out Zoo, because I think the thought process there was, it's pretty likely that I'm going to bring Zoo, and if not, Zoo's just a standard that everybody plays. I can't be scouted if I play this here, and I think that's one thing obviously there's like warm-up PCs and things here, but the players don't want to risk it. They don't want to risk being seen playing the decks that they want to practice.
That is something for me that this whole league is doing, that the Premiership is doing for the UK scene. If you're actually in a position now where you've got to avoid being scouted because you're playing regular, high-level, important Hearthstone, then the whole tournament is setting the scene up for the UK to actually, they're actually playing the player, not just going to a tournament and going, oh, I'll beat the other UK guys. So people are now actually metagaming, and that's fantastic to see.
Yeah, the other thing that I've seen the players practicing a lot backstage is they were coming up with some creative smack talk lines for each other, and I think that has paid off for Mysterious there, as he had some confident words coming out. So hoping the trend continues and we see some high quality bants going.
Don't think we'll see any smack talk from Leroy.
Okay.
We'll have to wait and see.
We'll wait and see, yeah.
We're going to go into a quick break, but do not go anywhere. Following the break, we're going to have our second semi-final. Hello Leroy against Jumbre.